Welcome to Coleman Report Live. I'm Bob Coleman, and we're talking Main Street and the small business lenders who help it grow. American Bankers, John Riosti, Thursdays with John. John, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you, Bob.
And Lance Sexton, our instructor extraordinaire, and Katie Watucky in an undisclosed location somewhere in Southern California.
I'm always.
I don't know if you two know this. Katie's moving to Seattle.
Yeah. Hopefully not the area that's occupied right now.
Not CHOP. Katie is she's moving, and of course, it's nice in today's virtual world. Katie, you have a job waiting for you, correct?
I do. I get to keep this.
All you need is an internet connection. Hey, thank you all for joining us. There's a certificate. Download those. I think you all know the drill on that. We have Lance is doing a webinar on Main Street lending and, of course, the 10-tab guaranteed package. But we have a ton of information. Let's go into it. And, John, I still like that picture of you. That's an awesome piece.
What person does? It's good to know.
Let's see. Where are we going? We going to polls, guys? There we go. What percentage of PPP fees has your institution received? And I have no idea what 1,005 is.
I like that one.
100%.
Yeah, we got.
If we could get 1,005%, I think everybody would open up and use up that 120 billion that's left real quick.
Well, 5%.
We have some jokes.
Yeah. John, what do you think of those numbers? Is that consistent with what people are telling you out there in the industry?
Yeah, actually, I'm a little surprised because if you combine the 100% line with the 90 to 90% line, that's
right, over half.
More than half, and we've been hearing that some banks were thinking it was going to shift a little into the future, either the third and fourth quarter. The benefits, but obviously that's not necessarily the case for everybody.
Lance, I think we have the question, but what are you telling the people who have less than 25%? What is your advice to them?
Well, one thing they need to make sure they check, Bob, is whether there were any errors, and it was clear in the guidance from SBA when you submit the separate PPP 1502 report that you needed to look and check if there was an error message. If there was an error message that would cause you to have to correct the 1502 report, that could be why you have not received your PPP processing funds. The other thing that impacts this, Bob, is if a participant bank or institution only participated in round one of PPP, they're probably going to be at 100% of their processing fees unless there's an error in their 1502 report. Those who participated in round one and round two, they're going to fall in those other categories because they probably have their processing fees from round one, and their processing fees from round two probably will come in July.
Lance, let's say I have an error in my May report. Do I go back and refix May, or do I just fix it in the June report?
I think you need, since the report has been submitted, to correct the errors in the initial report sent. And again, SBA has promised once they accept the 1502 report that you get paid in 3 to 5 days.
Very good. And we should, let's make a note of that, Michael. Let's ask that question, how long I don't think we've asked that question. Have we, Lance, how long it's taken to get paid?
We have not, and that would be interesting to hear because the promise, Bob, I'm fudging when I say 3 to 5 days. The guidance said 3 business days.
Well, no, the legislation said, not only the guidance, but the Congress said pay them in 3 days. We've asked you how satisfied your institution is with PPP, and over half of you said you were satisfied, but we want to know how your customers feel about it.
I would have to believe that they're somewhat satisfied, probably satisfied with it.
I would agree with that. Let's see, what do we got? There you go. 91% say satisfied. 64% there's some issues. But I think that's a pretty positive poll result, gentlemen.
Well, I do too, Bob. I think once forgiveness has taken place, those numbers might trend up to very satisfied.
John, is that what you're seeing out there in the industry?
Yes, I think so, and I wonder how much the effort in round two to really get to all of the communities and all of the borrowers who may have not gotten enough attention in round one has impacted the numbers, but I would imagine very positively.
PPP's cutting off next Tuesday unless there's an extension. It looks like, John, they're talking about it. No extension. You're shaking your head.
Well, they've been talking about it, but there would have to be some remarkable work over the weekend for that to happen. And I think Congress, they have a lot of competing issues, and I just think it's just fallen by the wayside. So.
But we like to ask big picture questions. How much money do you think's left in the PPP program? Oh, and the answers are 130, 100 to 130, 50 to 100, or less than 50 billion, as in B.
Well, Bob, this is a hard question because the number moves every day depending on cancellations and new PPP loans submitted.
Katie, 81% of our people got it right. What's the number, Katie?
So the most recent update we got was on Saturday, and that was 128 billion.
Yeah, as of that. John, what are you reporting? We have two more questions. I'm sorry, they weren't in my set. This is courtesy of John. Have you submitted a PPP forgiveness application?
I'm going to guess this is going to be very, very low on the yes.
Yeah, and those who answer yes, I'd love to know how they do it, but I'll let John address that in a second. Go ahead. What are the results, Michael? There you go. John, for those who answered yes, what are they doing, John?
I think all the information I have, I think that they are simply free-forming, to use a slang term, but doing what they think is the best and most clear form, that SBA would answer. And I was very interested to see that, because that sort of corresponds to the reporting we've done, that there are some banks that just have decided not to wait for the guidance that has to come out. It will inevitably come out about how to do this, how exactly to do this, sort of dotting the I's and crossing all the T's. Now the question is, what is SBA doing with those applications? So we'll try to get that to.
The fun part, guys, is we do know what needs to be submitted. We just don't know exactly how SBA wants it submitted. And I expect, John, you're just submitting these forgiveness apps to the servicing centers, Herndon, Little Rock, and Fresno. I don't know where else you would submit them.
Lance, and how do we determine if SBA accepts the application? What do we do? Look at that smile.
Typically, when you submit a servicing action, in fact, Bob, I had something to do with it. When you submit a servicing action that doesn't require SBA's approval, a unilateral action, you won't get a response. If you submit a action that does require SBA's approval, within 3 to 5 days, you will get a response on those. Okay, these do require SBA's approval, but I don't know that the servicing centers know what to do with it. And I'm speaking just on my knowledge. They may know what to do with them, but I would imagine they just hold them until further guidance is provided.
John, any insight?
If somebody from SBA is on here that can help me with that, please chime in.
John, any insight on that? Any additional insight?
No, I am working and very hopeful of talking to SBA officials soon, but I don't have any guidance on that I.
Well, Lance and I have gone on record. We think we'll get the guidance by next Tuesday. We'll see if we're right on that or not. I think do we have one more poll question, Michael? That's it. Okay.
No, it's-
Hey, John, tell us what you're working on these days.
Well, I'm working on a forgiveness article. It's funny you should mention that, Bob. And just sort of noting that it's not a crucial issue for banks the way some of the other PPP issues have been crucial in the past. But it is one, I guess there's just a level of anxiety. They'd like to get started on this. There's going to be a lot of work involved in this. It won't be work that's all due all at the same time, so it won't be sort of a crush like the application process was. But still, it will be a significant amount of labor. Some banks have decided to opt to pay a third party to come in and do the labor of making decisions and processing all the loans, packaging them, so that they're ready to submit to SBA. I talked to one bank CEO, and he said that's what they're going to do. They have done a very high volume of SBA loans, and he says now that the economy is beginning to pick back up, they don't have the personnel in-house that they can devote to that the way they could back in March. But I think most banks, most institutions just want to get going on this. It's a loose end. It's a big loose end, and they want to get moving.
Well, to put it in,
sooner rather than later.
Well, to put this in perspective, John, Lance, correct me if I'm wrong, but between last year, between 70 and 504, we did about 70,000 loans? Does that sound about right?
Yeah, it's that many loans and shy of $40 billion in loans, and now we're looking at
4.6 million. So I concur with you, John. SBA, I'm sure they're scrambling in terms of how do we handle the glut of what's going to, as you said, it'll trickle in. So that's the good news. But they obviously need infrastructure to process this.
Well, one of my big questions, Bob, John, and Katie, is our friends in the lender service provider community are going to be really busy, because I think there are a lot of institutions that will opt for what John is saying. Maybe not to sell the portfolio, but to get some help with processing forgiveness. So like our friend Chuck Evans and others who are in that industry, they're going to be busy people over the next few months.
John, and you were saying, John, do you have an idea? You've talked to several lenders. They've done over 1,000 applications for PPP. How many lenders are in that 1,000 plus range? Any idea?
I don't have a good idea, but I know it's many. In fact,
yeah,
I just heard today about a small MDI credit union in Mississippi, and I've got to follow up to find the name of this, because I'd love to be able to credit it and give the name, that did over 1,000 applications. I thought that's incredible, because 9 out of 10 MDI credit unions have less than $100 million in assets, and
right.
Probably significantly less. So there's an institution in Mississippi that did 1,000 plus, and that's a great story, and I hope to be able to tell it.
It's great for a number of reasons. Number one, it's good for the local Mississippi Main Street. Number two, it's good for the institution. They get all those fee income. And number three, if you're doing over 1,000, you've obviously developed an expertise on how to process that. So good for you for covering those positive stories, John.
Thank you.
Anything else, John, you're working on? What's
Well, that covers the main thing. I guess another, what we'd like to turn to next, if we can, pry our way, free of PPP, is to talk about the 504 program and the fact that is, having a surprisingly good year.
Well, yeah, the interest rates are amazing. Hey, let's get to some of these questions, Lance. Nathan asked us, do borrowers who receive PPP loan funds prior to June 5 and elect the 8-week covered period or 8-week alternative covered period get to use paid period that includes June 30th for access to the safe harbor, or do we have to wait until the end of the year?
Well, it depends on what their disbursement or their alternate payroll period is. I think the alternate payroll period probably would allow them to go through June 30th. Bob, a lot of it is the covered period the date June 30th really doesn't mean anything on the covered period. The covered period starts when the loan is fully dispersed, or it can be an alternate payroll period. It can be the first pay date after full disbursement of the PPP loans. So if that 8-week, if they want to use the 8-week period and that 8-week period extends beyond June the 30th, they can.
We have the follow-up question from Nathan is basically saying, hey, we have a 24-week covered period, but we have all the information already. What do we do?
Go ahead and prepare your forgiveness act. You can either use the SBA Form 3508, which will be a small number of PPP applicants. And yesterday in a webinar, we talked about the 3508 EZ, and John, I get tickled. EZ's never been an SBA form number. I think they stole it from the IRS. But anyway, a majority of your borrowers will, in fact, use the 3508 EZ. But, you know, if they've already spent the money, if they have the documentation, prepare the forgiveness application.
Lance, we had this question yesterday, held it over. Ian says, hey, we're stuck. How do we're not getting our PPP fees. Who do we reach out to SBA? He said Colson's doesn't have help. Denver Finance doesn't have anything to do. What do they do, Lance?
That's a good question. Denver's not going. It would typically be Coleman, and my expectation is they did have a 1502 report that had an error. You're supposed to be able to go into your 1502 dashboard and get those messages and find out what those errors are and make corrections. But Coleman typically would be who you need to contact to figure out what's going on with the 1502 report.
Okay, very good. Ariana asked, hey, very much in the weeds, Lance, we have payroll. Does it need to be covered for the incurred period in terms of their 24 weeks? For example, payroll was paid on the first Friday, but we didn't get the loan until the following week.
Well, when I read through the IFRs, it talks about the payroll is when it's paid is when it counts. For instance, if a payroll occurred after receiving the PPP loan, say you got your PPP loan on April 1st and you had a payroll on April the 8th, it might have been for the previous 2 weeks. That's still going to count as part of the forgivable expenses because the payroll was actually paid during the covered period.
Brooks asked the question, and we've had clarification from you, the audience, that said, hey, anything over $25,000 on an EIDL loan needs to have collateral. The question that she asked is, hey, can we be in a subordinate position or do we have to be in a primary position on the UCC, Lance?
I guess the EIDL loan is handled by SBA. So right. Is this a borrower or? I'm
sorry, we're doing a new 7A loan. So the question is, yeah, I misinterpreted the question. So the question is, who has priority, the 7A loan or EIDL loan?
That is the question you need to ask your servicing center. If you're in the eastern part of the country, email the Little Rock Commercial Loan Servicing Center. If you're in the western part of the country, email the Fresno Servicing Center. Now, I'm going to take a stab at it, Bob. I would expect the EIDL loan probably would subordinate to a new 7A loan, but that would require SBA's concurrence.
Concur on it. Very good. Jerome asked, what is the actual regulation for the processing income to be returned to us? We're only seeing trickle of our fees coming in.
There is an IFR, and I don't know the IFR number, but there's an IFR number that is one of the early interim final rules that talks about payment of the fee. But, you know, the basics are you file a separate 1502 report for your PPP portfolio. It's submitted the way you submit any other 1502 report to Coleman. Once it's accepted, SBA says they'll pay your processing fees in 3 days. If they're trickling in, I really don't have a good answer for the question, Bob. I will say this: it was such a gigantic program that for SBA to hit that 3-day mark would be a surprise for me. So if they're trickling in, it tells me that there was not a 1502 report issued. If they're trickling in, but
our last question is from Rahman. John, I'll throw this to you. Any update on P4?
No, there's talk about this. I don't even think there's actual legislation that's been drafted yet. So this is all in the very initial stages.
Very good. Katie, we're going to give you the last word. What are you working on for Fraud Friday?
So I've seen a lot of stories coming out this week, and I think I'll probably have to go through those later today to pick one. But let's just say I'm going to be busy for the next couple of weeks.
Very good. Hey, John, thank you so much for joining us from your undisclosed location. Lance, it's always good to see you. We'll talk to you all tomorrow. And thank you for joining us today for Cloud Report Live and for supporting America's Main Street, one entrepreneur at a time. Thanks a lot.
Have a good day.
have a good afternoon.